Hey friends, welcome to class 1 of the Crease Pattern tutorials and the Crease Pattern class. Today I'm going to be bringing you the beginner box pleat crease pattern structures. So as you can see, I have a bunch of crease patterns ahead of me, and basically we're going to work through two different structures, Elias Stretches and the most common form of level shifter, and I'll show you how to collapse some of them. And at the end, I also have exercises that you guys can do where I'll show you the collapsed base, but it is kind of a practice for you to start learning how to solve. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term box pleat, this is an example of a box pleat crease pattern. You can see everything is based on a grid versus non-box pleat or 22.5, diagonal, whatever you'd like to call it. You can kind of see the difference between these two crease patterns. We'll get to these ones later. It's a little bit easier to understand how to read these first before reading these. Now that we covered that, let's jump into it. Alright, so the first one we're going to start off with is this crease pattern right here. Now, all the crease patterns I have for this class will be linked in the description below for you guys to print out for yourself and try. Now, if you just need the picture and then a grid, such as just any ordinary origami paper, you can use that as well. You don't need the lines. Also, if you can't print in color, this tutorial will hopefully show that while the red and blue lines are helpful, you don't always need them. So print this one out, follow along. Now this one is based off an 8x8 grid. In this series we're going to be folding a lot of 8x8 grids. So if you're not sure how to do an 8x8 accordion grid, I have a video on how to do accordion grids. Go check that out. Come back. What I mean by accordion grid is that with the crease pattern face up, the edges are mountain. Both edges are mountain, and then the next is valley, and then it goes mountain, valley, as you can see here. Awesome. So now we're going to get into pre-creasing. So I'm going to leave this here just for reference because this one's kind of hard to see. But we are going to want to pre-crease these. Now pre-creasing is pretty simple. I'm not going to detail on too much. Since these are on the edges, you can flip your paper over, fold along the line. Now, once you get really used to this, you're not going to need the lines. You are going to be able to count 1, 2, 3 on the grid and pre-crease. However, as you are starting to learn, it might help for you to draw out the crease pattern if you are doing a more complex model on, say, double tissue paper where you don't have the mountain valley lines. That helped me a ton. I just draw in pencil, and after folding it, you can't see. Also, when you pre-crease, as you can see, this is mountain side up. See that mountain side? I like to pre-crease all mountain folds for Elias stretches, which are like these. Most of the time, you can get away with pre-creasing a entire crease pattern all mountain, and I'll show you why that's kind of easier. Only some structures will fully require you to pre-crease the correct mountain valley just to help you solve it. So now I'm going to show two different ways to fold these that are not in the middle. So obviously one is just to fold it on a table like this. However, not all crease patterns will be this simple to reach, especially if you're using larger paper. So the way, and also if you don't have a table and you're solving a crease pattern, you can also pre-crease by pinching down on the corner, being precise, and pinch on the end corner like this. So I'm just pinched, and you can already see that the line's formed, and I'm just going to pinch along the points and then crease like this. And that's how you can pre-crease stuff without a table or if it's hard to reach. Cool, pre-creasing is all done. Let's get to collapsing. Alright, so now we are ready to collapse, and before we collapse, I just kind of want to explain some things about the Elias stretch. It is named after Neil Elias because he was known for using it when box pleating started to be popular in the 1970s. And it was a maneuver that his designs often had. Now, in modern box pleating, I like to say it's a maneuver as well as a structure because of some other forms of Elias stretches we'll get to later. But yeah, that information was from Origami Design Secrets by Robert Lang. And the structure is named after Neil Elias. So let's get to collapsing. Now, as you can see, we have our grid lines. I might say these are grid lines or vertical lines, horizontal lines, or lateral lines. So that's what I'm going to refer to these as. And these I will refer to our pre-creased lines or diagonal lines, just so I don't confuse you all. Cool. So now the great thing about box pleating with an accordion grid is one of the easiest ways to solve structures like this is just to trust our accordion grid and grid lines. So let's start with this corner. And I am just going to fold both corners or edges in like this, just the mountain folds. And as you can see, it automatically mountain folds our pre-crease line. Now, if we do the same thing with valley, even though this was pre-creased mountain, it will collapse in as valley. And we can do that one more time for this mountain. Now you'll notice that once we get here, our pre-crease lines go back this way. So this is where you can kind of see that it's called a stretch, because if we fold our grid line one more in the valley direction and push out our mountain line here, so you guys can see that, you can see it's starting to kind of stretch the paper. And same thing, we're gonna hit this mountain right here, pull to valley, and finally the mountain automatically creases here. So now this is just some of the ways I like to solve Elias stretches if you don't know what's going on in the crease pattern. There's obviously many ways to do this and a more refined folding sequence. So I'm just gonna finish our grid like this, and we're gonna do the other side in the more sequence style. So we're just gonna hold our collapse like this. And again, just using the grid lines where our pre-crease lines are, just like this. And it will just collapse in on itself very easily. So if any part of this section confused you, make sure you understand this before continuing. And I have one collapsed of Kami so that maybe if you need to see it better, there you go. But give that a shot, pretty simple. Practice that and learn to identify Elias stretches. Cool, now we're gonna move on. All right, so this is the next crease pattern. In the description, this will be labeled as like Elias stretch 2 or rectangle Elias stretch. And basically what this is a Elias stretch in the middle of the paper, so not on the edge. And it is represented, this one is a diamond. So it might be hard to see here, but if you look at the picture I have for you guys, you'll notice it's a 3x2 rectangle. Now it could be 2x2, it could be bigger. This is a pretty common structure. So I'll show you just how to solve this really quick and pre-crease this as well. So pre-creasing. This is something, since it's in the middle, I like to use the method of creasing in the air, just because sometimes this paper is harder to reach. So as you can see, I'm being very precise on the corners. And for me, this is just a more efficient way, and I can kind of do this while I'm relaxing. You know, I don't need a table. I can just be sitting in a chair and pre-creasing like this. However, you can also line up and crease normally. Now it's okay if you over crease it a little bit, you know, as long as you don't get confused by it. that's alright. So you can do something like this as well. Pretty simple pre-crease. That's all we need. Again, all mountain accordion grid. Sweet. Let's move on to the collapse. Alright, now for the collapse. This one's going to be a little bit more tricky, but what I want you guys to see is that you can trust our grid lines, right? So I can actually start on the grid lines here and the mountain fold on this edge here, and I don't interrupt any of the Elias stretch. Now normally I like to pick a corner to start on where the grid lines are vertical. So let's start with this point right here, and I'm actually going to do the same thing of doing the mountain fold here again and a mountain fold here, and as we do this middle mount or valley fold, you'll see that we are able to do almost very similar to the Elias stretch we had in the last part, the last crease pattern, just like this. And from here it makes it very easy to solve as you do the other side. Keynote here, this line right here is going to push out, and that is how a flap is going to be created from this edge, or from not the edge. Alright, so if we follow the same thing on both sides, as you can see, we're stretching out here. Here's the other flap that's going to be made by this point, and just like this, it will collapse and create this edge or this flap. And then we're pretty much there, and we just have this last part that's nearly exactly like the Elias stretch we did previously, and all collapsed. It looks like this, and as you can see, depending on the shape of the rectangle, you get various sized flaps. So that is this middle Elias stretch, and these can be many different shapes, many different forms. They can be long, but basically any kind of box or polygon shape is this middle Elias stretch concept. And again, here is a Kami collapse in case this is easier to see, but you can definitely see that rectangle right in the middle. Awesome. So practice these two Elias stretches. These are the basic forms. We'll get into some more difficult examples later on, but we are going to move on to a different structure in the next crease pattern. Alright, so this exercise is practice for the Elias stretch I mentioned before and general diagonal crease pattern collapsing. So I'm not going to do a full breakdown on how to fold this, but I'll show you what it looks like as the completed model. So this is what is normally the structure you'll notice in the swords for my samurai, as well as some other swordsman models or any other, like by other designers and whatnot. But here's the collapse. I'll open it up for you all a little bit, and this uses a the rectangle middle Elias stretch we talked about. That was this one, but it's a little bit different shaped, but very similar. As you can see here, I accidentally folded this on white side, so it might be a little hard to see. Now the key thing I want you all to practice is once you have this collapsed, just for practice with this structure, you can actually kind of turn it so it pivots like this, and that's how you get, say, a hand around a sword. So this one you can practice shaping if you want, but otherwise just a good exercise on Elias stretches. So that wraps up everything for part 1, and I'm going to break class 1 into 2 parts, where the second part will be about basic level shifters. So I'm breaking it up into 2 parts just to save on time, so the videos are around 15 minutes each. So go check part 2 out, and we'll be doing some level shifters. Sweet.
All this origami